Islamic Revolutionary Court in Tehran sentenced 3 Iranian monarchists to prison term in a joint judicial lawsuit. The monarchists Asham Rezai, Muhammad Abul Hassani, and Shakila Monfared were reportedly sentenced to a total of 8 years and 6 months imprisonment by the Islamic Revolutionary Court, rights groups released. Tehran Islamic Revolutionary Court has issued a 15-month prison term and 4 months forced labor 4 hours a day against Asham Rezai and Muhammad Abul Hassani, each for alleged propaganda against the Islamic Republic in Iran. Further, Shakila Monfared was sentenced to 6 years in prison for alleged propaganda against IRI and blasphemy. Then, after agents took Shakila into prison, Shakila was initially arrested by security agents on August 31st, 2020 and sent to Tehran-based Sarallah headquarters controlled by RRGC. Then, she was taken into Tehran notorious Evin prison after interrogation examined. Finally, she was arrested on January 20th, 2021 after being summoned by the Islamic Court and taken into an unknown location. The other detainee, Asham Rezai, is kept at Rajai Shahr prison, serving his 8 years and 6 months prison term. Muhammad Abul Hassani also is being jailed at Evin prison, serving his 2 years imprisonment. The Islamic Revolutionary Courts have set up extrajudicial punishments against dozens of Iranians in the past months for reportedly supporting the monarchy. On May 20, 2020, Tehran Appeal Court upheld the verdict against 10 Iranians sentenced to more than 100 years in prison for reportedly supporting the monarchy. Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf claims that 20% uranium enrichment is ahead of schedule. The speaker Mohammad Ghalibaf said that the regime's 20% uranium enrichment in Fordo is ahead of the planned schedule. Over 40,000 people die annually of air pollution in Iran. The air in the Iranian capital of Tehran and some other metropolises across the country has become unbreathable, with the pollution index touching dangerously high levels. Based on the recent reports by the Tehran Air Quality Control Company, the inhabitants of the city inhaled more contaminated air in the past few months than during the same period last year. Iran's exports to Japan have been sharply dropped in 2020. Japan's official statistics show a sharp drop in Iran's exports to the country last year. Statistics from the Japanese Ministry of Economy show that the country's imports from Iran decreased to $34 million last year, which is equivalent to only 3% of its imports in 2019. According to the report published by the Japanese Ministry of Economy, Tokyo imported $1,210 million from Iran last year. Japan's exports to Iran also increased to $82 million last year, a growth of about 19% compared to 2019. This is the first time that Japan's export to Iran exceeds its imports. Japan expects a limited impact from the United States' decision not to renew waivers previously granted on Iran oil import sanctions. Reuters quoted the country's Trade and Industry Minister in 2019. Customs statistics from China, India, and South Korea also show that their exports to Iran last year surpassed their imports for the first time. Iran's exports to China halved in 2020 to $6.4 billion. Iran's exports to India and South Korea also fell from $4.3 billion in 2019 to $288 million last year. The Islamic Republic hanged second Iranian champion wrestler on Monday. Mehdi Ali Hosseini was sentenced to death for alleged premeditated murder after the Islamic Republic authorities forced him to confess to a crime he never committed. 5 political prisoners who are on death row at Ahvaz Central Prison sued their own mouths shut. to protest against extrajudicial trial they have undergone. They were tortured into a confession. The Islamic court accused them of revolt, enmity against God, and acting against national security. Iranian activist Payam Mohammadi was sentenced to 5 years and 8 months in prison and fined for alleged charges of propaganda against IRI and assembly and collusion against national security. He was previously arrested by the Islamic Intelligence Service. 2 citizens have been sentenced to 5 years in prison each for acting against national security through efforts at promoting Baha'i special religious education program. 2 Iranian female singers were summoned by the Islamic Morality Police and temporarily released on bail after being interrogated. A 25-year-old girl in Iran that is responsible for the well-being of her 6 siblings and her sick father says they survive on leftover food from the garbage bins. 42 years of Islamic Republic has brought nothing but misery for our compatriots. Agent who killed a 58-year-old woman in Kermanshah, Western Iran, was convicted to a suspended prison sentence. Asiye Panahi died after being pepper sprayed by police. Municipal agents viciously beat her. The municipal agents razed newly built house with loader under the pretext that Asiye Panahi's house was allegedly built without a construction permit. A group of citizens, police officers, peasants, teachers, workers, medical staff, nurses and shareholders held protests in Iran in the past week over financial difficulties, unpaid wages, job issues and lost money. IRGC operates 300 new groups based on the Sharia law on enjoining good and forbidding evil to impose Islamic codes and norms of conduct in public, especially regarding the hijab of women, but also for men. Further, IRGC patrols enforce Islamic codes of conduct in public, preventing the mangling of unrelated men and women, or controlling cohabiting couples. 2 juveniles in Desful, southwestern Iran attempted suicide by taking aluminium phosphide pills. A 16-year-old Iranian girl died of suicide. According to the reports, the suicide rate of juveniles in Iran has been increased due to poverty and financial difficulties.